When I find a game that I like, I play it a lot. In fact, I play it so much that it usually leaves the rest of my library neglected. Games like Need for Speed, Call of Duty, and Def Jam. One game that truly stuck out to me was Saints Row. Saints Row is a game that I found in the late 2000s, and when I played it, it gave me a feeling I had never experienced before. It was unique, it was bold, it was innovative, but as we all know, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Thus, it's pretty fair to say that Saints Row has had a monumental fall from grace. But why is that? Is it strictly because of the recent Saints Row reboot disaster? Or is there a deeper lying explanation for things? Was it inner conflict and politics regarding Volition and Deep Silver? Or was it simply Saints Row games gradually losing their identity to a point where it had no identity anymore? These are the questions I've been asking myself for just about 10 years now, and I think I've finally realized the answer. How did a multi-million dollar AAA game franchise go from a heavy hitter in the open world genre, genuinely keeping up with the best of the best, to then fall to a place only few would have ever thought was possible back when the series was in its peak? How is this all possible? This is the rise and fall of Saints Row. To explain, we are going to have to take things back. The year is 2006. Italy had just won the World Cup and the film Borat had just hit theaters. But beyond that, we were graced with this.
LeVar, you gonna let those bitches disrespect us?
Shit, what you think?
However, before we can dissect Saints Row in 2006, we're going to have to go back even further. The year is 2000 and the Summer Olympics in Australia is underway. It's also the year that Saints Row developers Volition were working on a video game titled Underground that was a pseudo open world heist game that took place in England that saw you take the role as a thief. Volition had worked on the game for 12 months with the game not coherently coming together with a clear vision. So much so that the game's own marketing team would question Volition on what the game is truly supposed to be. Fast forward to 2001 when GTA 3 came out. The expectations for Underground were now skyrocketed with marketing telling Volition things along the lines of, if you walk by a car you have to be able to hijack it and drive it, and all this stuff we hadn't planned for. The game was being tugged in one direction by marketing, while the team was fighting against it to stay true to their original vision. Thus, ultimately, Underground was cancelled and Volition ceased development on it immediately. Volition would then be greenlit to make their first ever licensed game in The Punisher. The game would be labeled by some as a torture simulator, and the ESRB wouldn't be a huge fan of the gore and torture tactics you could do within this digital world. Things like desaturating the scene and forcing the camera to look away were tactics used to make this game able to ship. Due to The Punisher being a successful title, Volition would increase its employee number exponentially. The only issue with that was that Volition's HQ was in a less than ideal location within the United States.
Volition, our studio, is located in the middle of a bunch of cornfields, basically. We're in Champaign, Illinois.
Champaign's a pretty awesome oasis in the middle of corn.
The original pitch for Saints Row spawned from a design exercise that Volition held, where the entire studio gathered around and the staff would have to come up with and pitch new game ideas. It just so happens that one of these game ideas was a gang simulator. At first, Volition Vice President Dan Cernak didn't think the idea of the game made sense, but he did know that there was a huge audience for these types of games. He knew that in order to succeed, they would have to break through into the open world genre due to the fact that there was little competition other than Grand Theft Auto regarding open world games at the time. Now was the opportunity to gather all the skills they had acquired developing games like The Punisher, Underground, and even Red Faction, and try to incorporate elements of each to make a fleshed out open world gang simulator. Taking direct inspiration from hip hop music videos like F the Police by NWA, and gathering various hip hop clips from movies and other forms of media, Volition were able to create the vibe they wanted to achieve for said game by putting together a makeshift vision trailer.
So we cobbled together this vision trailer by taking, clips from movies and clips from other games and cut it to a hip hop song name I can't remember, the song I can't remember, but yeah, it was the Police, that was it. And we played that in the boardroom, and there was dead silence afterwards, and the CFO says, "Is this really the kind of game that we want to be making.
Volition CEO Mike Kulas would come up with the following predetermined rules for the game. No children, no killing the police, and a couple other ones because of the fact that people were very nervous to make a game regarding gang culture.
People were very nervous about what we were doing there. I think some of them were probably worried, someone's going to throw bricks through my window or something like that.
It was an interesting struggle. There were people who were not happy with what we were making there. I mean, on the team, did not want to make that game, did not want to even be associated with that game.
The name of the original concept of the game would be titled Bling Bling. It would set out to be a serious gang simulator game, but at the same time letting the player do wacky and humorous things to take away some of the edge of being tied up in gang culture doing terrible things. By giving the player freedom and tools to use in the sandbox, like driving vehicles, using explosives, and many more things specifically mentioned were ways to relieve the seriousness of the game. To no avail of Volition, little did they know how much of a technical nightmare this game would soon turn out to be in terms of development. This studio would be tackling a genre they had never worked on before. The documentation of the game was incomplete, they weren't sure how fast it would be, how much memory it would take up, and they didn't know how much the throughput was going to be from the disc, which for a streaming open world game is really important.
That was definitely the hardest project I've been on. Technically, it was just extremely difficult, and we had to do streaming worlds for the first time, and I mean that alone is just enough to make some companies just shut down.
During development, a lot of people at the office were feeling like this game would not turn out well. Many features were being cut, and the overall feel was that this was going to be a giant waste of time within the studio, dealing with a level of complexity that the team had never dealt with prior. With a budget of roughly $8 to $9 million, which was exceeded very quickly, it was safe to say that people were having doubts on Bling Bling. Through all of this, THQ were the ones that truly believed in this game and knew it would succeed. The once small-time company within the cornfields of Champaign had now gone from 30 people on their entire team to well over 100. Volition had no idea how the game would be received by the public. In fact, there was a lot of negativity within the post-mortem. A post-mortem is where a team reflects on what went wrong with something they did and documents it or amends their process to stop it from happening again. The team would write their post-mortems prior to the game being received publicly, so without knowledge of the reception it was about to receive, a lot of the documents would be quite negative, and there would be a lot of criticism about management. It is now the summer of 2004, and for this next phase, development was moved to the Xbox 360. They wanted a more powerful system for creating an open world. The team wanted to further emphasize the open world freedom by not having to make the player wait at loading screens when entering districts or interiors, an occurrence you'd see in some of the 3D Grand Theft Auto games like San Andreas. Leftover files would show that this move was done around August 2004. It wouldn't be all smooth sailing though, as the upgrade to a next generation console showed to be a burden for Volition. The system had technology that hadn't been fully taken advantage of at the time, especially for a small development team, and due to the lack of experience with such technology. One of the most difficult parts of the transition was the memory output expansion, which was increased by 8 times, whereas the DVD's output was increased by 3 times. In order to not come across streaming issues, they decided to divide the city into chunks so that each section would be loaded at a time, in order for the game to run smoothly. Despite these issues, the transition was fairly smooth, and Microsoft would even help Volition by giving them necessary tools for further development. In the fall of 2004, a new map with more detail and approximately 4 city blocks in size was used for what would be called Phase 5 of development. This would be a proving ground for fundamental engine necessities. Footage of the build was shown off at a game developers conference in 2015, containing various differences from the final game. This was a video that showed off the vertical slice that demonstrated very early concepts of the game and what Volition intended to do with it. The main differences that were changed from this build to the final was the following. The game's extreme lag and choppy frame rate, that was most likely due to the team still getting used to the Xbox 360 hardware. The gunfire and muzzle flash were changed for the final build. The drastic flashing effect it had was most likely removed to reduce frame rate issues. The rival gang pedestrians all used the same model with minor alterations. The map of Saints Row, Stillwater, was conceptualized around Phase 6, which began in early 2005. It was developed even before the story was written, including which district belonged to which gang. The premise of the game would be similar to Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and True Crime Streets of LA, as it would be built around gangbanging in an urban setting. One of the key inspirations for Stillwater were cities like Chicago and Detroit, notably for the latter so it could have a rundown industrial feel to it. However, creating a city wasn't that of an easy task for Volition, because they had never created anything this big before. When Stillwater was laid out in the game's engine, the initial aim was to make the world as big as Vice City. At first, the team thought it was too small, so they quadrupled the size, but it would end up being far too big for the team to build a city that large, so it was downgraded back to its original scale. It was also the point where the team decided to cut flyable aircrafts due to the small map size, a gameplay mechanic which would then later return in Saints Row 2. The city went through many different names during months of conceptualization, where the suggestions were either real life, copyrighted, or over-the-top profane names. It was initially decided that Stillwater would be the name. It was a real-life city, so one L was dropped from the name, resulting in the iconic name of Stillwater we all know and love today. And just remember, kids, it's with one L, bitch. When the map draft was put together, it was initially a bit bigger in comparison to the final. Some of the cut districts and areas would eventually appear in Saints Row 2 in new locations. For example, though a full trailer park isn't present in the final game, it was downgraded to a singular trailer where it was used for the West Side Rollers snatch activity. Around the area of the mall's initial location is a small shopping district, which implies that they might have intended for the mall to be in Saints Row 1. The junkyard and train stations don't appear in the final game. The latter was likely reworked into King Plaza Station, found in the downtown district of Saints Row 2. The map was then drawn out by an artist, showing a rough draft of a planned layout of the city. After fully deciding on its size, the team decided to work on the buildings and road layouts, aiming to not duplicate city blocks and to put a bigger emphasis on detail in order to differentiate the world. It would go through many different layout changes in order to balance some of the activities and story missions in several areas. Their aim was to build the street layout first, put in the rough model and shading, then finally implement the building assets, geometry, and shading, where one artist worked in each neighborhood. This is an example of how much detail they wanted to incorporate to each specific area of the map. The Saints Row district was one of the first districts to be developed. The initial concept art of the iconic Saints Church seemed to have been located in the middle of grass rather than be surrounded by buildings like in the final game. The initial design of the neighborhood was what would eventually be the basis of the finalized Saints Row name idea. Designer Alvin Monnier was testing a prototype in a neighborhood that had the church within it, and during a moment where other devs were in the middle of a conversation on what to name the newly built district, the neighborhood was entered by Alvin, and the words, "You have entered Saints Row," appeared on screen, which prompted Doug Nelson, the designer, to use that name for the iconic district. Conceptualizing the characters was a bit more straightforward. One of the main characters, Johnny Gat, went through a couple of different initial looks, where it started off a bit basic into a rougher appearance, to then what was very similar to Gat's finalized design. Some of the early gang designs for the Vice Kings demonstrates them to be rocking fancier clothing than in the final game. Only a few elements of these initial designs would make it into the final designs of the characters and their respective lieutenants, likely due to the theme not being suitable for a semi-realistic, gritty gang setting. A similar fancy-looking gang would be loosely reworked within the Morningstar gang in Saints Row III. Early concepts for Los Carnales appear to have them in baggier clothes and looking much larger than they would in-game. None of the final models wore sports-themed jerseys or golden bling in the final designs. Most notably, the Rollers' clothing almost has a purplish hue to it. As Saints Row was gearing up to finally make their worldwide reveal to the gaming world, the marketing team would show off a pre-E3 press kit build with various screenshots. With E3 just a mere month away, this was truly go time within the stardom of this once renowned franchise. May 2005, E3. Saints Row was unveiled for the very first time at E3 2005, where it was listed as a launch window title for the then forthcoming Xbox 360 console. In the demonstration shown off at E3, it was a rough and laggy state where Microsoft ended up doubling the RAM size of the Xbox 360 for the game to run properly. It would also be shown off at Games Convention in August of 2005. The most major difference from this build to the final was the UI and the HUD, as it looked drastically different than what gamers received when the game launched. Some other pre-release marketing that they would do is promote the game via magazines. There was multiple articles about the game, whether it was GamePro Mag, Pure, Xbox Magazine, and even PlayStation Magazine. magazine. They would even go as far as to write the headlines of, "Is this the Grand Theft Auto killer?" on the cover of a GamePro magazine. After the game was shown off at E3 2005, the team needed a more realistic approach on how the Xbox 360 was going to support the game after they had mixed results surrounding the expensive RAM usage and unstable frame rate. The environment artists checked through every building in each district they had completed thus far, which were 400 blocks in just 3 days. Their target towards completing the general basis of the city was January 2006, but it was estimated to a rather lengthy completion date of January 2007. As a result, this is why Stilwater had to be cut down and downgraded in size and unique buildings, along with flattening some of the ramped hills that were once present. Much of the environmental work also had to be outsourced to Streamline Studios in terms of interiors, while the primary interior work was moved towards creating exterior ground creation. A map shown off in the GamePro magazine in 2005 had an earlier layout of Stilwater. Interestingly, the West Side Rollers is marked as a purple colored gang on the map, which is the only mention of this, whereas the Saints were still marked with green. A couple notable changes were that the racetrack near the Altar Dome was cut, and that the top left area surrounding Price's mansion seemed to have some extra uphill houses, while Price's mansion itself wasn't present at all. There also seemed to be a road leading out of it, likely as an underground sewage area of some sort. After seeing that Grand Theft Auto San Andreas' Grove Street gang were also using the color green as the gang color, Volition would decide to change the main color of the Saints. In order to find a new gang color, they had to avoid using red, blue, and yellow, since those were already taken in-game. So they chose purple because it represented royalty and wealth. This resulted in the West Side Rollers going for a fully blue hue, as opposed to indigo in order to avoid confusion. The game was shown off again at the X05 event in October, featuring a slightly later build. This would be the point in time where the game starts to overall resemble the final product. A newly updated Stilwater map would also be shown off after the event to something that would closely resemble the final, with only a handful of differences this time around. In November of 2005, the Saints Row logo would officially get a new design into the iconic lettering we know today. On February 7th, 2006, Saints Row was delayed all the way to August for polish. Quote, "The extra time has allowed us to really polish the game to a glossy shine. Making open world games is very challenging, and that difficulty is compounded when we're talking about a next generation look and feel. It's allowed us to really fine tune and balance the game to make sure each element is as polished as can be." 4 new images would release the following week. In April of 2006, the game was rated by the ESRB. Funny enough, there is a theory by Saints Row YouTuber Flippy that suggests that Volition actually hid the positive effects of drugs and alcohol within the world. That way the game wouldn't be flagged or banned in strict countries like Australia, as was the case with Saints Row 4, in which they had to censor an entire mission. Flippy goes on to mention that in the official guide of Saints Row 1, it states that the drugs and alcohol are simply cosmetic effects, which is a blatant lie. Whether this was Volition being sneaky or just them forgetting to mention it to the ESRB, I've always thought that this was an interesting theory about the game. Later on in the month, Volition announces that a SR1 demo will be hitting the Xbox Live stores for players to try and get an early glimpse as to what the game would have to offer players alike. There would be 3 demos in total that were distributed. The first was a pre-order disc demo, which could be obtained from pre-ordering Saints Row from GameStop. It has files dating back to June 20th, 2006. The second is an Xbox Magazine issue 61 demo, which came with said magazine. Files are dated a day later on June 21st, 2006. The third and final demo is the one on the Xbox Live Marketplace, which was only available for a limited time. That demo has unknown dates. However, before the demos were released, the game would be shown off one more time during E3 of 2006. The following footage was posted by GameSpot at E3 2006, except the footage shown in the build doesn't match up. In fact, 2 different builds are shown off here, as evident by the different minimaps. The main difference in one of the builds here was that the minimap seems to disappear, suggesting that Stilwater was being reworked at that point in development. The default play up preset was different, and the customization options were selected from a drop-down list rather than a scroll like in the final. The next E3 footage is a build that's almost identical to the final, with only minor differences shown off. On August 1st, just 1 month prior to the game's launch, the Saints Row 1 demo would be released. The demo starts off like the normal game and has you create a character then watch the opening cutscene. A notable change is that you weren't able to hop on top of cars to warp warp inside like you could in the final. This was most likely done to try and prevent players from escaping the confines of the demo, as you were only given a small area of the map to explore, although players were still able to break through the barriers fairly easy. Once you glitch past the wall, it was a very unstable game because of the fact that the demo wasn't meant for you to escape the boundaries. But on the plus side, you could obtain the AK-47 that you normally wouldn't have been able to acquire. On the main menu, you have a range of things to look through, some including an official trailer, a mini documentary on the making of Saints Row, some screenshots, some in-game music, and some gamer pictures and dashboard themes. The Saints Row 1 demo was a smashing hit. It seemed to resonate well with gamers around the world, as it was downloaded 350,000 times within its first week, the most in Xbox Live history up to that time. August 29th, 2006, Saints Row 1 would officially be released in North America. 2 days later, it would be released in Australia, and on September 1st, it would be released in Europe. The game received varying reviews according to review aggregation website Metacritic. Reviewers likened Saints Row to the Grand Theft Auto series. Some actually felt it improved on the gameplay of GTA, while others would criticize the game for lack of originality. Stephen Embling of Play.tm wrote that while the game isn't going to win any awards for originality, the game's graphics and sound design were impressive and highly commendable. Ryan McCaffrey of Games Radar Plus considered the game a worthy entry into a genre beholden to Grand Theft Auto, praising the game's graphics and use of the Havoc engine, but scolding the respect system for disrupting the story progression. Will Tootle of GameSpy considered that while not all players would respond positively to the respect system necessitating mission progression, the activities offer some of the game's most memorable sequences. Scott Sharkey of OneUp.com noted that Saints Row removed frustrating elements from previous Grand Theft Auto games, like load times between city sections and combat reliant on auto-aim, but considered its attempts to recreate urban gang culture and satire so hack-eyed that they cast an embarrassing shadow over the whole thing. In Japan, where the game was ported for release on June 21st, 2007, Famitsu gave it a score of 1.9, 2 8s, and 1.9 for a total of 34 out of 40. Detroit Free Press gave the game a score of a full 4 stars and said it was the deepest and most exciting to date of all the freewheeling street shooter games. There are missions and activities galore. The Times similarly gave it a full 4 stars and said, "This is a game guaranteed to offend and entertain in equal measure, but it is not for children." The Sydney Morning Herald gave it 4 stars out of 5 and said that the game lacks the clever subtlety and fun-loving sense of mischief of Grand Theft Auto, with much of its humor falling flat, but there's plenty of fun to be had while waiting for the real deal, referring to GTA 4, to be released in October next year. 411 Mania gave it a score of 7.5 out of 10 and said it was as addictive and guilty as sin fun as the game it imitates, and this is the one case where imitation is the best form of flattery. The AV Club similarly gave it a B and called it the perfect thug sim for your younger siblings. Saints Row received awards from GameSpot for most surprisingly good game of 2006, as well as Gaming Target for one of 52 games we'll still be playing from 2006 selection. Saints Row sold over 2 million copies and has since joined the Xbox 360 lineup of Platinum Hits games. Many critics and gamers had varying opinions on the game, as some would praise it and others would critique it for being uninspired or a GTA clone, which is a term that is flawed in logic in my opinion. There are similarities within the gameplay, but to call Saints Row 1 a GTA clone just doesn't make sense to me. In fact, you could make the argument that Driver 2 did open world hijacking and driving from a third-person perspective before GTA 3 even came out. This was the main reason for so many reviews simply writing the game off, unjustly labeled as the dreaded term of GTA clone. Therefore, in turn, a lot of gamers would skip out on this game and dismissed it as a cheap copy. If we take a look back at this ancient IGN review of the game, it pretty much sums up the general consensus of the reviews at the time.
This is an open design, 3D, third-person perspective action game, and it plays, looks, and feels just like GTA. Lastly, there's the humor.
Madre de Dios!
And the humor, once again, like so many aspects in Saints Row, tries to replicate the humor in Grand Theft Auto.
This has been said before, but the mere fact that in order to proceed with this documentary on Saints Row, I have to give points on why it is not a GTA clone just goes to show you how intertwined this franchise has unjustly become to that which came before it. It is fair to say that Saints Row was inspired by GTA. However, that is not the same as saying it imitated GTA, as inspiration is not the same as imitation, which is something that reviewers at the time just simply couldn't grasp. In my opinion, and many other gamers alike, Saints Row separated itself from Grand Theft Auto in the form of numerous unique gameplay aspects. Being able to customize your character to exactly the preferences of your choosing, with options from plastic surgery, clothing shops, tattoo parlors, barbers, and jewelers. A very tight and robust aiming system that allowed your player to smoothly free aim at enemies rather than zoom to lock on that was present at the time within the Grand Theft Auto franchise. Being able to choose freely which missions you'll be doing in a non-linear way, allowing the player to choose which gangs they'd like to take down in which order. A weapon wheel that allowed for quick switching your weapons in your arsenal, separate notoriety systems for cops and gangs within the world, various activities that would grant you respect in order to do more missions, a mission retry button upon failing a mission or activity, being able to call in various phone numbers you see around the world for different bonuses. For example, calling the taxi for a fast travel, or typing in a cheat code phone number, or calling in a homie for backup, a fully working GPS system, a fully fleshed out clan system within the game's multiplayer, which we will get into a little later on. These are the things that separated Saints Row from GTA that most reviewers at the time would fail to mention. This would create an aura around the game that would hinder the sales, thus making Saints Row 1 a very underrated title. Another reason for Saints Row to be considered an underrated title is the mere fact that it is only available on Xbox. Even to this day, the only legal way to play the game is to purchase it on Xbox. There is a way to emulate the game via PC, but to some that would be considered piracy, so I guess it's up to you on where you stand on that moral compass. My point being is that a large portion of gamers have still yet to ever experience the first Saints Row game that launched this series into becoming a franchise, but to those who were lucky enough to play the game, they know just how immaculate the experience truly was. And for those out there who just simply would like to learn about the game, allow me to give you a very brief rundown of it. This is a topic I know you have heard countless times before, so I'll just go over it shortly for those that are unfamiliar. Missions in Saints Row are divided between 3 linear story arcs, which can be progressed through simultaneously or one by one, each with the objective of extinguishing a rival gang. Players engage in these missions at their leisure, but a prerequisite to instigate the mission is that they have filled up a bar on their respect meter to allow them to unlock and play it. Respect is a currency earned by completing activities, which are mini-games that are scattered across the world and have increasing levels of difficulty. Missions and activities also accrue a player's cash income, which can be spent on goods and services such as weapons and clothes. Should players fail a mission, they may instantly reattempt it without incurring a loss of their respect points. Cinemas scattered throughout the game world allow players to replay missions an unlimited number of times. So the opening of Saints Row takes place in Stilwater as the city suffers from gang warfare at the hands of 3 distinct criminal syndicates. The Vice Kings, an African American gang that primarily focuses on earning revenue from strip clubs, brothels, and record labels. Los Carnales, a Hispanic drug cartel that dominates the narcotic trade and gun running. And the West Side Rollers, a gang consisting of Caucasian and Asian members who operate on the lucrative underground racing club. The player character, a random bystander, becomes caught in a crossfire between the 3 gangs while walking through the streets of Saints Row, but is saved by Troy Bradshaw, a member of a smaller multiracial gang called the 3rd Street Saints. Because of the increase in violence, Saints leader Julius Little initiates the player into a gang and has them reclaim Saints Row from their rivals, before assigning them to work under his top lieutenants, Dex, Troy, Johnny Gat, and Lynn, in wiping out each rival gang. Gat focuses on hitting operations owned by the Vice Kings, including faking the death of their key asset, Gat's girlfriend and popular R&B artist Aisha, which culminate in the gang's leader, Benjamin King, being betrayed by his closest associates for refusing to respond to the Saints' actions. After Julius has him rescued, Benjamin agrees to retire his gang in exchange for the Saints' help in killing his traitorous successor, former Vice King's Madam, Tanya Winters. Meanwhile, Dex focuses on the Carnales by having the player help the Saints take over their drug operations and ultimately eliminate their leaders, brothers Hector and Angelo Lopez, while also securing a deal with the gang's chief Colombian supplier, Manuel Oruela. Concurrently, Lynn works undercover amongst the rollers.
Who's got the rollers?
I do.
Lynn? The fuck you wearing blue for?
I asked Lynn to hook up with the rollers. We don't know much about these fuckers, so I wanted one of us on the inside.
I didn't think the rollers pimped hoes.
Any other comments?
Yeah, when you punch, don't throw your shoulders so much.
Shut up, Johnny.
Hey, I'm just saying.
Eventually learning that the gang is led by street racer Joseph Price and his uncle, wealthy private attorney William Sharp. The player helps Lynn earn Price's trust, but Sharp eventually deduces that Lynn is a mole and attempts to have her and the player killed. Lynn does not survive the encounter, so the player exacts revenge by killing Sharp and Price. With the city now firmly under the control of the Saints, Julius rewards the player for their efforts by naming him his chief lieutenant and his right-hand man. Shortly thereafter, however, Stillwater's corrupt police chief Richard Monroe has Julius arrested and forces the player to assassinate the city's mayor for his opponent, Alderman Richard Hughes, under the threat of having Julius killed in prison. The player complies, but Monroe refuses to release Julius, leading the Saints to ambush Monroe's motorcade, killing him and rescuing Julius. After winning the mayoral election, Hughes invites the player to his private yacht, where he reveals his intentions to have the Saints arrested and the Saints Row district sold to private developers after being razed. Meanwhile, Troy is revealed to have been an undercover cop working to dismantle the Saints, and Julius watches the yacht from a distance, having placed hidden explosives on it. As Julius leaves, the yacht is destroyed in an explosion, seemingly killing everyone on board. As the credits roll, Jack Armstrong and Jane Valderrama give one final newscast about the recent events in Stillwater, leading into the events of Saints Row 2. Interestingly enough, the ending of Saints Row 1 was actually originally supposed to be different. The ending was supposed to show Julius beaten and bloody running down an alleyway, but since the animators were missing this animation, they chose not to call the motion capture team for one specific session and instead opted to recycle an animation of Aisha looking at her watch, therefore signifying that Julius was the one who planted the explosives. So due to animators being lazy, the entire course of the plot was changed, since Julius wasn't originally supposed to be the one who caused the boat explosion. This was explained during a live stream done by Volition as part of their series playthrough back in 2013. This, in turn, would change the events of Saints Row 2 into what consumers know and love today just by a fluke. Those who purchased Saints Row 1 by not only the aforementioned points of having a great city, unique gameplay features, and unlocks, but by the game's lore and history. For example, while listening to the radio, the player can hear commercials signifying that certain stores will be having a sale for a brief period of time that would actually take place in-game, or other simple things like seeing a random phone number on the wall, dialing the number, and being greeted with either a unique dialogue interaction or some sort of unlock. Combining all these elements and jam-packing them into a disc was impressive for the year. However, it doesn't stop there. Saints Row 1 not only had the single-player mode, but it had a player versus player multiplayer mode with a thriving competitive scene. Saints Row 1 has a variety of multiplayer modes, including co-op, Gangsta Brawl, Team Gangsta Brawl, Big Ass Chains, Team Big Ass Chains, Blinged Out Ride, and Protect the Pimp. Co-op supports 2 players, while all other modes support up to 12 players. The co-op missions are newly crafted multiplayer missions and not the missions available from the single-player campaign. In this game, it is not possible to play storyline missions or activities or to explore Stillwater in co-op. A system link cable can be used to play offline without being connected to Xbox Live. Your Xbox Live character is separate from your offline character, and you have to earn cash from multiplayer matches to purchase customization items such as clothing and tattoos. On Xbox Live, you can also join gangs, or create your own, and participate on the leaderboards. These gang servers would be the spark of the competitive scene in SR1 and would elevate the multiplayer experience to something many players had never experienced at the time.
My American bow. Oh yeah, you like my American bow.
You can't run the show.
Yeah, you like my American bow. You like them good?
The Gangs tab allows you to form a new gang or join one if invited for online play. If you are already in a gang, you can view information about it on this tab as well as set up gang matches. If you do not belong to a gang, you can either create one or join an existing one if you have been invited. When creating a gang, you can choose your name, tag, URL, and motto. The name of your gang will be shown on all leaderboards. Your gang's tag is a prefix that will go before the names of all gang members so other players can recognize it. For instance, if your name is John Doe and your tag is 187, your name will appear as 187 John Doe. The URL is a web address you want your gang members to visit. For instance, a website dedicated to your gang. The motto is a tagline that sums up what your gang is about to other people. For instance, the toughest crew in Stilwater. Once you have formed a gang, you can invite people to join it via Xbox Live. If you are currently in a gang, the gang tab allows you to edit your gang info or quit the gang, as well as view the list of gang members and your gang stats. Gangs would not become ranked until they have completed 10 matches. To set up a gang match, select the Create Gang Lobby option. From there, you can pit your gang against another one in a ranked match. Note that you can only belong to one gang at a given time. True Skill is your multiplayer ranking in Saints Row. It lets all other players on Xbox Live know what your relative skill level is. In Saints Row, a player's rank ranges from 1 to 50. As you play more ranked matches, your true skill bar will change, narrowing the length of the yellow section and moving it left to right as you beat or are beaten by your opponents, until your rank is clearly defined. So a high-ranked player will have their yellow section moved to the right of the bar, with only a little or none of the black section after it, while a low-ranked player will have their yellow section moved to the left with a ton of black section after it and very little silver section before it. Whenever you play a ranked match, you will automatically be placed in a match with people within your skill level. Each online mode has a unique true skill bar associated with it. Reaching specific true skill ranks can unlock achievements. Thug, rank 16, Killer, rank 22, Gangster, rank 26, and Kingpin, rank 31. Now, of course, this information about gang servers is all obsolete now, but I thought it was still worth the discussion. There are plenty of people that have no idea Saints Row 1 competitive multiplayer was this complex and featured a system that was truly ahead of its time. In a way, it was almost like game battles before game battles was a thing. It's a shame that the system was abandoned in the sequel via SR2's multiplayer, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't get even worse in that game's sequel, SR3. But I digress. Looking back at the reception of Saints Row after a couple months post-release is quite interesting. While many critics were claiming it was a GTA clone, like mentioned earlier in this video, there was a true fan base that had grown to love the game. These people recognized that the game was different than just a GTA clone, and this is a sentiment that is heavily felt in today's day as well, all these years later. The game has actually aged better than a lot of the other Saints Row games, and I think it's partly due to the simplicity of the story, mechanics, and gameplay. It never tried to step out of bounds of what it was trying to achieve. It didn't have to rely on bombastic set pieces like the newer iterations of Saints Row seem to do. Just take a look at Saints Row the 3rd and Saints Row 4, for example, and even Saints Row 2 to a lesser degree. The characters all felt grounded and realistic, sometimes feeling like you're watching an early 2000s crime drama TV series.
You're the one who ran off to be famous. The only time you remember who we are is when you want something.
My sister was kidnapped.
And I brought her back, didn't I?
No, he did.
Bullshit. I told him to do it. No offense.
Look, if you're gonna help me, help me. But don't you dare try to hold it over me.
Fine.
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 There was nothing that felt forced in this game. No forced diversity like you see in a lot of modern media. Rather, you have a natural feeling diverse cast. No forced political views, none of that kind of stuff. Just simply a beautiful game. When you walk around in the game, you can just tell that so much love and passion went into it from Volition. If you look back at old interviews when they were marketing the game, you can see the fiery passion in their eyes when describing what adventures are to come for the player.
We're going to show you here is what the city looks like in the evening. The game, of course, is going to transition smoothly from day to night. And, you know, it has all sorts of things like weather, rain, and fog, and so on. What we're doing here is breaking into a store. Because at night, a lot of stores are locked, but you can still break into them. Now, the alarm's going off. The police are going to be arriving, but you got to get in there, smash open the cash register, and get out the cash.
I mean, just look at that sick, twisted smile as he's mowing people down. That's passion. That passion is not only evident when looking back at these old interviews, but the world of Stillwater itself as well. It's just so damn good. We all know Los Santos is based off Los Angeles, and Vice City is based off Miami. But with Stillwater, it has a little bit of everything. A mini America when you really break it down. The north of Stillwater has luxurious buildings, skyscrapers, and is a taste of the downtown fast life of top money-making CEOs. The downtown can be seen as a representation of wealth, power, and fame, in which all tend to consolidate in one area, as proven by the Vice Kings with their corruption, by their connects due to their wealth. The northwest of the map can be diluted to the area where the wealthy people of Stillwater live their day-to-day lives, with good-sized semi-detached homes galore. The housing market would be absolutely booming in the suburbs of Stillwater in today's day and age, which makes sense why the wannabe punk street racers take up this territory in The Rollers. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we have the southeast of Stillwater. Here lays the rundown buildings, houses, ghettos, and projects. My buddy House Hexagon has stated it best when it comes to this area of the map. This district represents the typical post-globalized working class area, whereby so many people languishing in poverty have found themselves turning to a life of crime and gangs out of desperation due to a clear lack of opportunity. This belief is supported the more south you go into the factories district. There are most definitely factories, but there is barely anyone working in them. They are seemingly all abandoned, which makes it fitting that the Los Carnales have this territory under their control. A gang that profiteers from selling drugs prospers in an area whereby so many of its residents are looking for a cheap and easy escape. Am I looking far too deep into this matter and maybe these are all giant coincidences? Maybe. Actually, no, I don't think so. I think this was all due to passion from the developers. This is what happens when they really care about the world they are crafting. Now, taking this all into account, you have to realize that Volition managed to accomplish all of this with 20% of the budget Rockstar was given and 30% of the staff. They held their own against the open world juggernauts themselves, and then some. The true fans have always known this, but it seems just as of late, Saints Row 1 has been getting some more love. As if this game gets more love as the time goes on, which I think is fair, but at the same time, I wish even more people saw this game's beauty when it first came out. Nonetheless, it was still a whopping success for Volition, and their gamble paid off. As Saints Row emerged triumphant in the competitive landscape of open-world gaming, it did more than capture the attention of players. It dared to challenge the reigning titan of the genre, Rockstar, and their Grand Theft Auto series. In the pursuit of innovation and player agency, Saints Row climbed the ranks, carving a niche for itself and signaling a shift in the dynamics of the open-world gaming monopoly. The audacious spirit of Saints Row, with its freedom of expression and over-the-top gameplay, posed a formidable challenge to the established conventions of this genre. The game's success was not just a victory for Volition, it represented a victory for diversity in storytelling, gameplay, and player immersion. As the gaming community embraced the Saints Row experience, it became evident that the open world monopoly previously held by Rockstar was facing a credible contender. The success of this game was more than just a commercial triumph. It was a bridge connecting developers at Volition with a global audience eager for more, and more they received. As the legacy of Saints Row continued, the stage was set for the eagerly anticipated sequel. Saints Row 2 beckoned players back into the neon-lit streets of Stillwater, promising a continuation of the wild ride that had endeared the franchise to millions at this point. The heartfelt reception of the first game had laid the foundation for a franchise that would not only endure, but flourish for a number of years, showcasing the enduring impact of a game that dared to be different. In fact, the sequel, Saints Row 2, had been worked on 1 year prior to Saints Row 1 even being finished.
And And so, even though most critics called it out for being a GTA clone, they also said that in some ways it actually improved on its inspiration. Whatever they thought, the game turned into Volition's biggest hit since Red Faction by selling 2 million copies. For that matter, Red Faction's main antagonist, the evil Ultor Corporation, even makes a cameo appearance in Saints Row, theoretically bridging those two franchises. How could Saints Row possibly get any more insane? How about if Volition started work on the sequel a year before the first game even finished?
So about a year before Saints Row 1 shipped, we had probably about 5 people on Saints Row 2. Yeah, they were working on it for a long time, and it's difficult. We don't really know what's going to work. You're going to be wrong in some cases, you know. The stuff you thought was really good, customers may not care that much about, and other things that are in the game, they might you might learn that that's what they really like, and that's what you want to, you know, amplify and deliver more of in the next one.
However, as the subsequent decade unfolded, the landscape of Saints Row underwent a transformation, one that foreshadowed a divergence from the elements that initially endeared it to fans. The sequels, while introducing new features and expanding the narrative, would also witness a departure from the franchise's original identity. As we reflect on the legacy of Saints Row and its daring challenge to the status quo, we must acknowledge the complexities of maintaining a unique identity within the ever-evolving gaming industry. Over the next decade, Saints Row would grapple with the delicate balance of staying true to its roots while responding to the changing tastes and expectations of the gaming audience. It's a narrative not uncommon in the gaming world, a struggle between innovation and the desire to cater to a broad audience. The sequels, while introducing new elements and iterating on gameplay mechanics, face the challenge of preserving the irreverent charm that defined the first game. As the series expanded, some fans felt a delusion of the original essence that made Saints Row a groundbreaking experience. In this inevitable evolution, Saints Row found itself navigating a delicate path, a path where the pursuit of mass appeal could sometimes overshadow the distinct flavor that had once set it apart. The very features that had challenged the open world monopoly were in some instances diluted or replaced, leaving a portion of the fan base nostalgic for the audacity and uniqueness of the original two games. The story of Saints Row then becomes a cautionary tale, an exploration of the fine line between evolution and identity loss in the dynamic landscape of gaming. As we look back at the audacious entry that dared to challenge giants, we also acknowledge the challenges that would follow, a reminder that even the boldest of pioneers must navigate the intricate dance of innovation and tradition. In the years that followed, Saints Row would continue to evolve, attempting to find its footing in a gaming industry that relentlessly pushes boundaries. Yet, the echoes of its initial success, the freedom it provided players, and the irreverent charm that made it an icon would remain etched in the memories of those who experienced the original rise of the Third Street Saints, a rise that, despite its challenges, forever altered the landscape of open world gaming.
It's our time now. Let's get this shit started.
Back to your crib. You know what? I think Julius was right about you.
But, with all that said and done, as we bring our exploration of Saints Row to a close, it's fascinating to witness the ripples of success that this audacious game sent through the gaming industry. The tale of Volition's triumph against the open world monopoly was just the beginning, and little did we know that the story was about to take an even more exhilarating turn. As the credits rolled on the original Saints Row, signaling both a temporary farewell to the neon-lit streets of Stillwater and the anticipation of what laid ahead, Volition was on the cusp of something extraordinary. The stage was set for a sequel that would not only build upon the foundation laid by its predecessor, but would elevate the Saints to new heights. As we wrap up this chapter, I can't help but implore you to stay tethered to this docu-series of mine. Saints Row 2 was not just a continuation, it was an emotional crescendo, a symphony of pixels and polygons that would resonate deep within the hearts of players. What happened in the development development studios at Volition during the interim period was a whirlwind of creativity, ambition, and an unwavering commitment to delivering an experience that would surpass expectations. The team, fueled by the success of Saints Row 1, was about to unleash something even more daring, more expansive, and more captivating. As we wrap up this chapter of the Saints Row saga, I invite you to stay tuned for the next installment. Saints Row 2 was not just a sequel, it was a revelation, a game that would redefine the open world genre once again. The Saints were gearing up for a comeback, and the digital landscape of Stillwater was on the brink of a revolution. So, dear viewer, keep your eyes peeled, because the story of Saints Row is far from over. The streets are calling, the adventure awaits, and the legacy of the 3rd Street Saints is destined for even greater heights. Join me as we dive into the thrilling narrative of Saints Row 2, where the stakes are higher, the chaos is grander, and the journey promises to be an unforgettable ride through the heart of open world mayhem. Because without a historic rise, there wouldn't be a fall from grace, all the way splat on the floor. Click the video on screen now to join me in this emotional odyssey as we prepare to relive the greatest open world game of all time, and get ready to witness the Saints rise once again, a testament to the enduring power of gaming to elicit joy, nostalgia, and perhaps a few tears as we move closer to the rise and fall
of Saints Row.